Hi, everybody. My name is Mihir Wanchoo, and I want to welcome you all to Fantasy Book Critics, authors, and their favorite book series. Joining me today is one of our really favorite authors. We discovered him thanks to SPFPO. In the third edition of SPFPO, we are lucky to have Alec Hutson's Crimson Queen in our lot, and I say lucky because it is purely by chance, and it happened to be our finalist for that year. So joining me today is Alec Hutson. He's also an author who has been blurbed, or so as to speak, by Will White. His book was The Crimson Queen, and the Raveling trilogy is complete. It's been super successful. Last year, he released Shadows of the Dust, which was a science fantasy with giant beasts and space travel, and it's really cool. So welcome, Alec. How have you been?
Thank you so much, Mihir. I have been great, and it's very nice to join you here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So what is the book you would like to talk about today, as though it's the book that is really one of your favorites and has made an impact to you as a reader as well?
Well, I love fantasy, and I've read fairly widely in the genre, I like to think. And the book that I consistently rank as my favorite in the genre is called The Scar by China Miéville. I guess I can go into how China impacted me as a writer. So when I was in college, up until college, I had been sort of a very straight-laced fantasy reader. I had been reading things like, Robert Jordan and the Forgotten Realms type books. And when I arrived in college, I tried to broaden my horizons. And so I went out and tried to find books that were sort of on the periphery of mainstream fantasy. And one of the books that I was given that I found was called Perdido Street Station. And it absolutely changed what I thought fantasy could be on many levels, from the language it used to the world building, to the plot, to the way they handled characters. And so China has been one of my favorite writers ever since, and I think The Scar is his best book. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So thank you for that and letting us know. Now, I do have a follow-up question. Since you mentioned this, like, can you discovered China Miéville, and apologies for mispronouncing his name. Was The Scar the first book, or did you read Perdido Street Station first, or was it any of his other works that you happened to take a look at, and then you happen to find The Scar next?
No, I read Perdido Street Station first, and I think at the time that I read it, perhaps only his first book, King Rat, was out, so I read that immediately. And then The Scar came out soon after I had discovered China, and then I read that, and I think I've read it 4 or 5 times at this point. It's probably one of the books that I've read the most, along with like Game of Thrones and maybe some Guy Gabriel Kay, like Under Heaven.
You mentioned both of these, both with George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire and Guy Gabriel Kay, historical fantasy, if you want to call that. They're both pretty unique in what they do, but in that regards, Guy Gabriel Kay's standalone books are more in line with what China does, with his, because almost, I don't want to say like all of his books are standalone. Of course, they share the same world, and you kind of world of Baslag, and you kind of know that there's like small hints here and there. There's things that you might see if you read the novels in a sequential way. But what do you think about what do you think about the standalone nature of his books? Because again, with The Scar, the Perdido Street Station, and the book that followed after it as well, they're all kind of in the new Prosubon series, if I'm not wrong. That's what they're titled. What is your take on the standalone nature of this? Are they truly standalone? Are they not? Or are they just somewhere in between?
They certainly are standalone. They can be read on their own. I appreciate it because with something like Robert Jordan, if you want to read, or Malazan, if you want to read, well, Midnight Tides isn't a good example, but if you want to read Chain of Dogs or whatever, something or House of Chains, that's later in the series, it's very odd as a reader to dip into the 6th book in a sequential series. But Baslag, the connections are fairly tenuous between the different books. So you can just, if I wanted to read Iron Council, I could pick that up and read it, and it would be perfectly fine. I do recommend that readers start with Perdido, because I think it's a good way to ground yourself in the world and understand China's worldview as well. But You really could read any of them at any time. And Guy Gabriel kind of like that as well. If you read Under Heaven or what is it, River of Stars, there's very little.
Yes. A Brightness long ago as well. Maybe that's a different. Because there's two of them which are like kind of in like they're analogs of 8th and 12th century China.
Yep.
But they're set in the same. I think it's maybe I must. Yeah, I don't think it's Brightest long ago. It's either one River of Stars and the one which you just mentioned before.
Under Heaven, yeah, which is a great book.
Yes.
Also top 10 for me.
We can. I would love to get you to talk about Guy Gabriel Kay as well, but for today, I'm just going to have you focus on China Miéville. I want to kind of clarify something. So you just mentioned that if given a choice, or your recommendation would be to start from Perdido Street Station, because I believe the events of that book kind of influence or kind of influence the why some things are happening within this one, the Scar as well. Readers who have read like the way you have, they would kind of pick up on that. But for readers who haven't, they would just be, I wouldn't say they're lost, but they kind of, there's mentions of those of something happening over there, which is why things are happening this way. That was a very unique feature. But China Miéville also does a lot of, his writing is unique, as you also say. Would you say that it is would you say that it is by far the most unique you have come across, or are there certain similarities with other writers as well?
Oh, I wouldn't say he's the most unique. I think you can get kind of into the weeds of new weird fiction and find weirder stuff. You know, like Viraconium and what is it called? The M. John Harrison. No, M. John Harrison is Viraconium. Who writes? Vandermeer wrote.
Oh, Jeff Vandermeer.
Yeah, he wrote a fantasy series that the name escapes me now. But anyway, I think Miéville is actually fairly accessible compared to some other of the more peripheral writers not peripheral, but new weird style writers in fantasy, because his plots and his world building, they do make sense to fans of traditional fantasy or more traditional fantasy books, while other stuff is totally alien and bizarre in all aspects. Honestly, the strangest thing about Miéville might be the way he handles his characters, particularly his main character, and his writing itself, which is I think he is one of the more distinctive styles of any writer working in fantasy.
I want to get to this because like the way you mentioned, like he does certain things with his main characters. He kind of, and his writing style and the way he describes things as well. Because especially with this book, The Scar, Perdido Street Station was, mostly landlocked. This is not. It's set on the sea. There's a nautical voyage and everything. And of course, there we have the Armada, which is like the giant floating city. And his descriptions about the Armada are pretty unique because it kind of makes it seem like a city of its own, with its own subterranean level, well, not subterranean, but like kind of levels to it. The people who have gleaned a life on it and who are looking forward to everything that it has to offer. Would you say that is the most, that is the defining point of this book, or would you see that there's something else that is better than this one?
In terms of The Scar versus Perdido or other ones of New Crobes and books. So I think at its heart, The Scar is about a city, right? I mean, Miéville is obsessed with cities. He's he loves cities. He loves urban landscapes. You can see it in pretty much all of his work, outside of maybe like The Census Taker and Embassy Town, depending on how you define city. But with The Scar, it's about a city, but it's an ambulatory city. It moves around. In which case, but it actually probably 80% of the book is essentially in a city, right? Just like New Crobes or Perdido is like 100% pretty much. Yep. But outside of when they go to the Anopheles Island, it's actually, at least in regards to where the story is set. It's set in a city, just a city that a very unique city. In terms of differences with Perdido, the biggest difference is just on the meta level. The plot is much, much tighter. Perdido is an introduction to the world, and it's sprawling, and it's not tight. So The Scar actually is a very well plotted book, and everything fits together like a puzzle extraordinarily well by the time you finish it all, and you can look back and see the hints that were dropped and things like that. Perdido is different. And so that's the big difference between The Scar and I think this book, and even Iron Council. I think Miéville does he has that tension in his work where he's trying to reconcile the sprawling nature of his writing and his world with the need to have a focused plot. And The Scar is the one where that balance is achieved best, in my opinion.
Perfect. Wow. Okay. That is, I definitely hear you where you're coming from, because with Perdido, like, he often introduces situations and characters, and then you kind of don't really see them all the way until the end, where the threads start coming together. Unlike that with the Scar, it kind of, its focus, yes, you do find different characters doing different things, but they're all kind of leading towards anything, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is, because you kind of have hinted at it, what would you say was your favorite aspect of this book? Was it the plot? Was it the world settings, or nautical settings, or the characters?
Well, as someone who loves writing and loves the way sentences fit together and the words chosen, Miéville's writing is my favorite part of reading his books. He has a very unique style, and it gives me joy just to read how he describes things, and the way that the flow of his writing itself. But outside of that, I really love the way he handles world building, the creativity and imagination that infuses his work. I don't think there's another writer out there, I think, in fantasy that approaches his level of creativity. And the incredible thing is about his work is that he'll have some aside, a few sentences dropped in, but with a concept embedded in it that I want to turn into like a 5-book series, right? Because it's so interesting. But for him, it's just a throwaway idea. It's something that just occurred to him in the moment and he put down, and it happens to be more brilliant than anything I'll ever come up with in my life, which is both depressing but also thrilling to read. I'm reminded of I think in Iron Council, just randomly which is about like a train line. It's hard to explain in short words, but he stumbles across a poker game being played, and it's part of a society where laws are decided basically at the poker table, or like in a card game. Laws are traded, and like of a society, it's such a fascinating concept. But it was literally like 4 sentences, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And Miéville is full of those little moments that I don't know. I just when I read him, I can feel. I can, like, things are just going off in my head like little explosions, right? Like things are blossoming, just thinking of just trying to just appreciating the fecundity of his imagination.
Well, I definitely hear you on that. I do think you're selling yourself a little bit short, sir. Yes, of course, because he's your favorite writer, I think you have put him on a literal pedestal, which in this case, literally, but you're right about that. Like, he has these throwaway sentences. He has this, I don't want to call it but he has this imaginative ideas which he just seeds within, and sometimes they blossom and sometimes they don't, and they're just there because they're there, like you mentioned, like you're thinking about this. And the Iron Council, it's really hard to kind of explain what it's about. You can say that it's about a railway line which is kind of like around a desert, and then there's more, but you can't really reveal it without giving more spoilers. But I don't think the spoilers really help, because then you'll be like, there's more, and there's levels like this. I do want to ask you about this, because you mentioned, like, with his writing style. His writing style made Perdido Street Station unique, as it did make The Scar unique as well. But they're both kind of different in the sense that, one was land focused, even though you're right, all of his focus is usually on cities or the urban, the urban environment, or the attempts to make something urban. But the first, in this new Crows of Bond series, the first one was more landlocked, or completely landlocked, as you said. But the second one was completely, except for the parts that they visit the islands, but it's completely on the sea or around the sea. Do you think there was a conscious choice on his behalf to have it, one be landmass oriented, the other one be completely water oriented?
If I was to guess, I would say that China has conjured up all sorts of urban landscapes and cities, and he wanted to write a book about a city that wandered around. And could have adventures, essentially, like you would in a traditional fantasy book, right? There's very few fantasy books that are completely constrained to a single city. Usually it's a journey, right? And Armada goes on a journey, just like in a typical fantasy book. He just had to come up with a conceit that allowed for the city to have its adventure. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it definitely was a conscious choice, but I think it's just what he wanted for the story. But I think that maybe it's also the reason why he was able to have such a focused, such a different kind of plot, than he does in his other books, because the migratory nature of Armada allowed him to go different places.
That is true. That is definitely true. Good point, sir. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the ending, because and for our viewers, this book is out for 20 years. There's going to be spoilers. We will try not to spoil the mail plot, but there's going to be spoilers. And I just want to say that out loud, so that way you can talk about it a little bit more freely, because there have been some readers, and you can see this across the Goodreads reviews, that some who feel that the ending is brilliant, some who feel that the ending is a little bit anticlimactic because of a major confrontation that happens off the pages. Like, you kind of see its aftermath, but you don't really see the confrontation, because it kind of seems as if it was building, the book was building up to that, but then the confrontation happens off the pages. From your perspective, and I know, again, I know that you love this book, but I want to maybe get your perspective as a reader who had read it for the first time, and from your perspective as a writer now who has read it multiple times and still happens to love it.
That's a really good question. Thinking back, I read it 20 years ago. So my memories of what I felt after finishing it might perhaps be colored a bit by the last couple decades. I believe, even at the time, I considered it one of my favorite books. I couldn't have been that dissatisfied with the ending. But I will say that I think I did probably feel a little bit, not cheated, but dissatisfied that you're right, that what they've been building towards for the entire book, essentially they don't go through with it at the very, very end, for reasons that make total sense. But you want to know about what's the mysteries of the scar, and then you never really find anything out at the end. I just reread the book a few days ago in anticipation of this, and I didn't remember just how manipulative Uther Duel was in it. And I guess the first time, I don't think I picked up the first time I read it that he was manipulating Bellis from the beginning, and that as a probability expert, he had probably seen the chain of possibilities that resulted in the outcome he wanted. And some of the things that he does that don't seem to make sense actually do make sense in the context that he's actually orchestrating, like a concert conductor, to reach the outcome that he wants. And I when I realized that this time, it made me wonder, why does he want this outcome? And I think that's also one of the strengths of the book, this uncertainty, because I don't know, I feel one of the differences between literature with a small L and literature with a big L is the degree of interpretation that's required at the end. Usually, if a book wraps up neatly and patly, it's satisfying, but it's not transcendent, right? So I think one of the things that actually moves the Scar beyond just being a fantasy book is the sort of open-ended nature of the ending that requires you to consider why did things happen, what will happen, what actually happened, and that sort of introspection is what for me makes it even more satisfying. I realize some people might want a set answer. This is what the Scar was. This is why it happened. Hedregal was the real Hedregal, and he and Uther had orchestrated this all. But I think that would also sort of cheapen the ending, and it gives it more power. The fact that you're not sure what actually happened, what China intended, you have to kind of read closely to look for any clues as to the true chain of events that led to the ending.
No, that you hit it on the point. The transcendental nature of any artwork is that when there's that ambiguity and people will have discussions. With this book, the ending, the way it ended, because of course you have a letter which Bellis is reading, and you kind of then you're still unsure whether like you mentioned, how much was it planned, probability, and how much was it just happenstance. In this regard, it kind of reminds me of the ending to Inception, with what happens with what's his name, Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He this thing and then he walks off, and then literally it's spinning, and then just before it's about to take a tumble, the screen cuts to black, and of course it's kind of I mean, yes, it's a whole different genre. There's a screen medium, there's a book, but you kind of get the same feeling, right? That there's what really did happen. Like even she's not sure. The main character Bella, she's not sure either. And as a reader, you're like you mentioned, like you're just more conflicted. Like in some ways, I think yes, I would have preferred like a more clear view of what actually happened. But I think then it wouldn't be the same book, right?
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm also thinking of something like The Sopranos, right? We were talking about Inception, but it's the same sort of ending. If someone had just walked in and shot Tony, that would be the end of the series, and people would feel closure at that moment, but it would be a less remembered and powerful ending in the long run, right? Or if he just survived. Like it's that the word that I was actually searching for was ambiguity, and you pulled it out. Thank you. That ambiguity, I think, actually is present in a lot of the great works of literature or media, and it actually is the correct way to end a lot of powerful works, I think.
That is true. Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation, and thank you for like clarifying that as well. Though I must say I was not a fan of Sopranos. I'm so sorry. I know you're a fan, but I mean, as much as I like the start and the middle of the series, the ending kind of really made me frustrated at what's his name, the maker of the series, David something, because and yeah, you're right. I wish he had shown a little bit more, like, maybe there are shots fired. He doesn't have to show who gets hit, but even if there are shots fired, it would be somewhat better, because he literally just, it's like the door opens. Who is it? It could be a kid. It could be somebody from like, working in a deli. It could be literally one of Tony's friends, or it could be a hitman. Who could it be? I just wish he had shown a little bit more before, cutting to black. And then of course, but I'm pretty sure he must have received a lot of flack for that ending as well. I mean, as many people who loved it, there are a lot of people who must be like outright hated it. Like, couldn't you have just done a little bit more? By the way, is Sopranos one of your favorite series? Did you like that?
It's not. I appreciate it. I like The Sopranos. It's not one of my favorite series. I think it's I'm not a grimdark writer, and I think that's sort of a grimdark show.
Well, it's very rare for a gangster, anything to be said about gangsters to be not dark. Like, gangsters by their professions and the way the books are set up. I mean, like the only thing I can think of is like, which is kind of like the least dark gangster book I can think of is The Godfather, because like almost there's very few amounts of violence, but it's almost sanitized. Like, the entire view of the book is like, there's this I don't want to say patriarchal, but like this kind of like this all-knowing, all good person who's forced to take the evil side just to kind of help himself out. But of course, Mario Puzo, that's a discussion for another thing, because how much I love Godfather and what it is. Sorry, getting back to China Miéville. You mentioned just a little while ago, you kind of get a sense of China Miéville's thoughts and his, I don't want to say political leanings, but his socio-political leanings within his books. Would you say that is on purpose? Would you say that's just who he is, and that's why he infuses the books with those kind of leaning? Or do you think that's just something which people have now, of course, because of his extracurricular writings have kind of just been like, oh, that's what that was?
No, I mean, I think it informs not only his writings, but I think probably who he is. I wouldn't even be surprised if he wrote the Baslag books as a way to influence people. His readers, because I feel like it's very much part of who he is, and what he truly believes.
Which is interesting nowadays, especially with the advent of politics just almost everywhere, right? Because it's previously when we were all without I don't want to say internet, but without such interconnectivity thanks to social media, you couldn't really see how much politics was influenced. And of course, the USA was kind of like the epicenter of the world culturally, but you can kind of see its effects everywhere. But now you can kind of see almost every country being affected by politics, and right, left, and everywhere in between as well.
Yeah, but I think this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's just more overt now. Like, it used to be much more, maybe perhaps a bit more subtle. But I mean, I would say that my entire worldview and sense of humor was shaped by watching The Simpsons as a kid from like 1990 to like 1996. And that show is extremely political, but it's not overtly political, not in the way that a lot of things are now today. But it's just as effective at shaping worldviews as, CNN, Fox News, and Tucker Carlson, or whoever else is the tastemakers nowadays, or the
Joe Rogan, of all people. who would have believed it? Like the fear factor guy would
Yeah.
be a person who's people listening to.
Yeah, this is a dark timeline, no doubt.
It is. It's like somebody was always joking that, around like 2012 or whatever that time was, when the first time the CERN reactor was started, maybe we have slipped into it, and here we are, because everything doesn't make sense. Like, which is why we need books of, not less, I don't want to say less grimdark, but we at least do need some noble epic fantasy books, which at least there's at least the humanity and the nobility of humanity is still present. It's good to read those. Sorry, I do want to ask a little bit more about China Miéville, and because I know you're a fan, so I want to ask you if according to you, was he kind of like I don't want to say the harbinger, but like, did he herald the change of new weird fantasy in the early 2000s?
I once saw a quote from, I think it was Jeff Vandermeer, who predated Miéville as a writer of new weird, where he said that that the battleship Miéville is the foray into the mainstream by new weird writers. They were there before, but he was the one who brought this brand of fantasy maybe to the masses a little bit more and opened the door for people like Vandermeer to find more mainstream success. But yes, definitely he's not the first, but he's, I think, probably even still the most successful, even though he releases a book every 3 or 4 years and really just works on whatever personal projects intrigue him at the time. He's not really looking to be, have his books turn into movies or to write bestsellers.
Which is kind of strange, right? Because I'm not saying that his books would make the easy transition to the big screen or to as a TV show as well, but they would be fascinating to watch. Just like, each chapter, each book in the New Crozabon series could be one season of a TV show, and you could just get this fascinating insight and views.
I think that would be almost impossible live action. I think it goes beyond. What does a cactus person look like on screen? It would look ridiculous. Maybe if you did like a Dark Crystal sort of like, not a age resistance type of deal, you could maybe, but it would still look goofy, I think. Maybe I'm personally of the opinion after watching Arcane that animation is the future of fantasy. So perhaps you could do something interesting with a certain style of animation for like Perdido, and but yeah, I think it would be a very, very difficult author and particular book series to translate into film. Although I'd love to see it. I'd love to see the attempt.
It's just like I think like nowadays with the streaming wars and so many, I don't want to say networks, but like these streaming giants, they're looking for newer material. And they have the money. They have the money to throw it around. So why not at least attempt for it? Like, because everybody thought Dune was unfilmable. David Lynch's attempt showed how weird and unfilmable it was until Denis Villeneuve came along and he produced like the first half of the book, and it is spectacular to see this. Of course it has its critics, but the giant earthworms, everything, it's there. Of course it's not the same. I completely agree with you. Dune is not the same as this book, because this book has a lot more weird stuff going on. But maybe they can do it at a time. Maybe in 30 years from now, there'll be a different version of it, and they'll be like, oh, that's the David Lynch version of, the China Miéville books. Yeah,
well, that would be amazing. What David Lynch, Miéville, that would be crazy.
Before we kind of jump on to your, I do want to get this one last point about China Miéville and the scar and everything. He, like you mentioned, he writes a completely different style of books, and thanks to him, it's like writers like Jeff Vandermeer and other writers who have gotten famous. In fact, Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy, the first book, was even made into a film, and I think it starred, oh dear God, what's her name? I'm forgetting her. Oh dear God, never mind. I'll remember her name later.
It's Padme, right? Isn't it?
Yes, Padme from Star Wars. I haven't watched Star Wars, that's why I'm not very good. So
Natalie Portman?
Yep, Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman plays the main character, and of course it's like, the whole thing. That movie was, I'm not the biggest fan of it because it kind of strayed a little bit from the books, but that was kind of successful as well. So that's why I keep on wondering, like, why couldn't they, like, why shouldn't they, or why couldn't they make? But let's say if you had the choice, like, given that you've read recently between China Miéville's books, if you had the choice and you had the money and you were the controller, like you would get to say yes or no, which book or series of his would you like to adapt? in what format, and why? And I know you kind of mentioned the adult animation, but I just want to get, like, if you're given the choice about everything of all that he has produced.
I think what might make the best movie and most would be something like King Rat, because it's so contained, and I don't think it would require that much ridiculousness. Perhaps one of his children's books, like Unlondon, would be a good option. I think Railsea might be a little too weird, but something, maybe something like Unlondon might actually be a pretty reasonable. It'd still be filled with bizarre special effects and creatures, but at least you're working from the basis of our world, so you can, a lot of it is, you won't have to conjure up a completely unique setting like Armada.
That is true. Thank you for that. And I was also thinking, like, maybe the city in the city, because it has got that, the whole concept of like a universe as well. And
they made that into a TV show. I didn't watch it.
Oh, they did? I didn't even know this.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I could be wrong about that. It's actually not my favorite Miéville. Okay. I do appreciate it, but I think they may have. So
okay, I will look into it and I will make a mention of it afterwards in the about section of this video, because that's really that would be. I kind of like that book and Kraken the most, just because of the way that he has set up the city, and again, city concept of, like, there's more and more and more happening. All right, thank you so much for talking so much about China Miéville, but now comes the really difficult part, talking about your books. And what's next, Alec? I know most authors don't like to talk about this, but as a fan, I cannot let you go, and I want to talk, because you have two finished trilogies. You have the Swords and Saints trilogy that's done. You have the Raveling trilogy that's done as well. Last year, you did release Shadows of the Dust, which was a standalone in what I'm hoping is a new universe. It could be wrong. It could be in the same universe as well. But A, what are you currently writing? And B, what would be your next release?
My next what? Sorry?
Your next release, sir.
I am a really big fan of Will White's Cradle series, and I wanted to try my hand at writing something in that vein. I discovered that I can't write a book like Cradle. It's not how I write, but I've recently finished, and it's now getting edited, a book that has elements of what they call progression fantasy, which is tiered power levels, and the main character usually starts weak and becomes strong. But I think this book has more elements of epic fantasy than a normal progression fantasy book. Maybe moves a little bit slower. It has a more sweeping narrative, when a lot of them are hyper focused on just the climb through the power rankings. That is sort of secondary to the maybe meta plot that's going on. So it is different. I'm curious when it's released, which will be in May, if the progression fantasy readers like it, or they reject it because it's so different on a core principle or concept that they like. But I think readers who enjoyed the Raveling will like it, because it does have a lot of those elements of world building and the same epic fantasy narrative that they appreciate, I think.
I can tell you of two folks who would be dying to read it. Patrick of Novel Notions, Adam Weller from Fantasy Book Review. I can definitely tell you they both are huge fans of yours. They would love it. I would love to see that as well.
I will probably reach out to you, and maybe you can help connect new people, because I am absolutely terrible at this aspect of the business, which is not marketing, but making connections and things like that. So
it's not difficult. If you ask, like, I'm not even kidding, like, if you just tweet out, like, hey, I have my newest book releasing, are there any ARCs are available? I'm going to tell you that you're going to get a deluge, but I'd glad to, because I'll definitely get you in touch in both of them, and many more of the people whom I know are huge fans of yours. So that is your upcoming release. So for all our viewers, you can check more of that. Alec, hopefully we'll be releasing more information soon, and hopefully we'll be getting to do a cover reveal, so where you can get to find the name, the book, everything over there. I do want to ask you now that you said it's currently in editing, so hopefully it's closer to release. Are you writing anything currently, or are you just waiting to get the edits back and then start working on that?
So this was the first book in the series. And so I haven't actually started the second one. I'm still sort of just tinkering with the manuscript. I'll have an idea. I like this before release. I tend to mull a lot on where I think the weak points are in the book, and get feedback from people who are reading early versions. And then, so like yesterday, I rewrote the last few paragraphs of the book because I wasn't completely happy with them. I find that very, very useful. I'm also outlining the second book. So I'm sort of brainstorming ideas. Like I know the general sweep of the story, but it still requires a lot of just contemplation about how things are going to work.
That's fair.
So I'm doing that as well. So, but I'm not writing any fresh fiction right now. I'm sort of revising and preparing for the next one.
All important steps. I do want to ask you about Shadows of the Dust. I'm sorry, I apologize for this because this book was really something truly amazing. The way you ended it, it definitely works as a standalone, with the world that is introduced within and those giant beasts and everything. And kudos on that last battle, that was epic beyond anything, with the giant creatures and everything, and the reveal about the Emperor and who or what the Emperor is. Are there, and I know this is, you might not have any plans, but is that like a finished one and done book, or do you hope maybe sometime down the line in the future, you might be able to write more within this universe?
I would say that writing Shadows of Dust was probably the most fun I've had writing a book. I really had a lot of fun doing it because I could just kind of let my imagination the setting allows for basically an unconstrained imagination. Anything is possible. So I really enjoyed writing it. And I would like to get back to it. Now that I'm starting this new series, which definitely has to have a second book, I think I should probably, hey, sorry, my cat, probably finish that and then see what I'm doing. I do have other ideas as well. I wouldn't say I get bored easily, but I do like to skip around and that's why we probably won't see me writing a 9-book series or something like that. I do like Shadows of Us was very refreshing for me to write, and I would like to return. And I have some ideas kicking around that would be fun, but it's not on the immediate horizon. But thank you for the kind words.
No, that's absolutely okay. Because believe me, as a fantasy fan with so many series that are just left pending, and again, we're not mentioning the behemoths. I'm just saying, like, anytime you hear the words 8, 9, 10, 12 book series, you're at some level, as a fantasy fan, you're a little bit apprehensive. Like, yes, you want to give the benefit of the doubt to the authors, but you also want to see if they're able to carry forward with it. And of course, they shouldn't lose interest as well, because writing an 8 or 9 book series is not easy. You have to have the passion for it. You have to have the beats planned out and everything, all of that. So thank you for letting us know about that. Lastly, before I let you go, I do want to make a mention of this, the fact that last year you had blurbed M.L. Spencer's Dragon Mage. It was an excellent book. It's one of the few books that you have blurbed. Have you read anything fascinating in the past few months, or maybe through your author friends? Have you read something interesting that is upcoming that you would like to highlight or give a shout out to?
Well, I literally just finished Legends and Lattes, which I kind of went into being like, how could this be good? Like, this must all be hype. And then it actually was really, really fun. It very, very well written and constructed. Like, I can see why it really resonated with a lot of people. That was a lot of fun. I did just, read the alpha version of Phil Tucker's next fantasy or science fiction series. And it was really, really good. And he's Bastion. It was a very sprawling epic. This one is very pared down, but it's, he's so good at just keeping the momentum up for the entire thing. So it's like, I don't know what it is, like 70, 80,000 words for the first book, but it just flies by because it's and it's got some good concepts in it as well. So I really enjoyed that. The best book I've read in probably the last, half year or something, probably be Victoria Goddard's Hands of the Emperor, which is an absolutely incredible book that is not much spoken of on like our fantasy or in the fantasy sphere, but I think it has the same potential as like the Goblin Emperor. If people pick it up, it's just a fantastic book on many, many levels. It's not fast paced. It's a not slice of life, but it's a fantasy of manners type, very slow moving book, but beautifully written, with some extremely heartwarming scenes. So that's what I've been that's what I've read recently that I was really impressed with.
Well, thank you for that. I had no idea about this. I was just looking it up on Amazon. It's like 420 reviews, all 5-star. Victoria got her Hands of the Emperor. I will check it out. So thank you for letting us know. I'm gonna keep an eye out for Phil Tucker's, whenever he announces the science fiction series. You mentioned the other books which you mentioned were this one, and of course, Legends and Lattes, which I don't know if you have heard. Just recently, yesterday, it came out that Tor UK has picked it up. So that's pretty cool for a book which came out of nowhere, resonated so strongly, and now has gotten picked up on the UK side. I'm hoping something happens on the US side as well. So we'll see though.
It should. I think it's the kind of book that will do really, really well. Yeah.
And I think given the timeline where we are in, I think that has also helped. Cozy fantasy, with a lot of distraction, they would really want to check that out as well. Have you gotten any offers or at least any interest from, any of the streaming giants for your work? Because your work is pretty cool too.
Streaming giants. Wait. So like publishing houses or
both?
No. I was contacted by an editor at Tor a few years ago, but I'm not sure what could ever come of that. They had just seen they had read the Crimson Queen and liked it, and wanted to collaborate in the future possibly, but I do have an idea that I think would work well with what traditional publishing likes, but I need to find the time to write it. In terms of streaming, no, I've never been approached by any sort of media house. I think that's extremely rare, especially for a mid-level writer like myself.
Hey, you never know, but also because the reason why I asked this is because Netflix previously, this was unsaid that they were taking offers from, or just at least approaches from almost anybody who was agented or at least had wanted to, just give them, just send them an email and ask them about this, like, hey, I have the series, this is what I've been successful on. Would you be interested? So now they actually opened it up. They made it official that if you have an agent, or even if you have some amount of success, you can actually directly email them. And I'm pretty sure in the next few years, we will see some of those hidden gems kind of pop out as well. That would be interesting, which is why I asked you, because I feel your books are very marketable and they're the sort of epic fantasy, which is 3-4 seasons of TV. They would make great TV as well. All right. Alec, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to me today, especially after your birthday. I don't know if you were tired, but thank you again for meeting with me early in the morning. I don't have any other questions, but I do want to thank you for the upcoming cover reveal as well. We will let our viewers know, and we'll also post about it more. Any last words for our viewers, sir?
Nothing. Just I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm sort of a private person, introverted writer. So I'm not really out there. So it's just very nice to interact and talk about fantasy. I love talking about literature and fantasy. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again, Alec. And thank you to everyone who's watching this. Please keep an eye out. We will definitely be including links to Alec's website, Goodreads, Amazon page, as well as his previous book reviews. For his upcoming book, for more knowledge about it, we will be hosting a cover reveal for it later in the month of May, so keep an eye out for that as well. I can promise you the cover is spectacular, to say the least. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much.